Welcome everyone. Welcome to this session in the Ubuntu Symposium. Going to discuss today is on the issue and agenda of dignified maturation and the potential role of men and boys in the reconstruction of power within the agenda of dignified maturation. And we'll delve more into this later on. Please follow us if you are on social media or with the hashtag Ubuntu Symposium or Symposio Ubuntu and join the conversation so that we can connect with broader conversation happening around this Ubuntu Symposium that we are currently having. So before we go into details, first I wanted to sort of take a moment to introduce the speakers for today. So the way we are going to do is I'll request the speakers to introduce themselves and give one message of the reason why they decided to join this agenda and movement, and also encourage at the same time for the participants that you can add and introduce yourself in the chat box with your name, organization, and the pronouns that you prefer in the chat box, and we can connect there. So for that, I'd like to first request Esther to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Laxman. Good evening, everyone. It's already 4 in Uganda. I am Esther Chazike from Uganda. I work with Kawempe Youth Center, a youth-oriented organization. I am the director of the Youth Center, which was founded in 2002. We work to empower young people with information to develop themselves. I'm part of the Uganda Youth Network, and I'm also part of the Uganda Community Libraries Board, where I serve as a member. And I'm also part of the steering committee of Dignified Administration, the Global South Dignified Administration. I'm happy to be here. I am passionate about women development. I was incidentally elected as a woman councillor in January to represent my community. So I am happy to be in that position. I am very sure that with all the knowledge and the skills that I have, I'll be able to support women, especially in areas concerning menstruation and other development issues affecting women. I'm happy to be here and to share my experience. Yeah.
Thank you, Esther. Welcome. Over to Mili.
Hello, good morning. My name is Milia Dikari. I'm she and her pronouns, and I'm the director for the Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation North America chapter, as well as in the steering committee members for our global coalition. So I am deeply committed to sexual, reproductive, and menstrual health equity and justice and dignified menstruation. And my work revolves around really encouraging that bodily autonomy and literacy so that we can achieve that liberation, and that cannot come without dignity with menstruation and freedom from violence, from any kind of violence against menstruators and menstruation. So that's what I'm here to do today. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Radhaji.
Namaste. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, friends. I'm Radha, a nurse, activist, author, and founder for Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation. I strongly believe that the menstrual discrimination is a form of sexual and gender-based violence and human rights violation. That is why I am here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Radhaji. We will do a little more into all of this in a minute. So before that, we apologize that we won't be able to have one of our speakers, Anupaji, today join us because of her family situation, but she is with us in spirit, so we will fill in her thoughts that she was going to present in the conversation as well. Again, namaskar, welcome. My name is Lakshman Delvase. I am also from Nepal, but currently based in Washington, D.C. I work as one of the co-directors at the Minimalist Global Alliance that is hosting this Ubuntu Symposium, and part of the Global South Coalition as the Secretariat team member, as a technical support to the coalition, and bring in the aspect of the roles of men and boys in this conversation, and try to sort of bring men and boys on board in the same struggle, as we are looking at more broadly on equality, issues of equality and justice. Okay, so moving forward, so may I invite Radhaji to just give a background of why dignified menstruation, why Global South leadership in this agenda, and also why are we now, also based on your experiences and leadership for over a decade now, and now we are talking about boys and men in this conversation. So if you can just give that background, and then we'll move into more conversation among all four of us, or three of you in particular, to on this on your experience and what is it that we what inspired with to be able to engage. So Radhaji, if you can, we know you are having some difficulties right now, but please, as much as you can.
Thank you. My sincere apology that I could not speak passionately as I am before, because I have a severe toothache. Even I am taking painkillers. Before sharing my thoughts about the campaign on dignified menstruation, let me differentiate two words: menstrual discrimination and dignified menstruation. For Global South Coalition, menstrual discrimination refers to any form of stigma, taboos, abuses, violence, restrictions related with the menstruation throughout the life of the menstruators. In other hand, menstrual discrimination is the other side of the coin. I mean, it is a solution. It is a holistic approach to address the complex and multifaceted menstrual phenomena. It is a state of free from any kind of stigma, taboos, abuses, violence, restrictions associated with the menstruation throughout the life cycle of the menstruator. So we need to understand the two sides of the coin while we talk about the menstruation. While talking about the background of the campaign, is a kind of long story, and it's connected with my personal story. It's really long, but let me share very briefly. Exactly 40 years back, or when I was about 7 years old, I was deeply traumatized by knowing the menstrual discrimination from my mother and three sisters. I had chosen suicide at the age of 9 years old in order to get rid of from such suffocation happening due to the menstrual discrimination. Somehow I survived. Later, I ran away for 5 days during my first menstruation. I supposed to confine within a room for 21 days as my sisters. I keep changing my thoughts about menstrual discrimination as I grow up physically and mentally. Means the menstrual discrimination is not only prevalent at my home or my hometown or my district, or not only at the western part of the country, it is across the country. Additionally, I also knew that it is not only the issue of Hindu religion. Some sort of menstrual discrimination has been practicing across all religions. Likewise, it is not only the caste or education or occupation. Let me tell the other way around. Regardless of the class, caste, religion, occupation, region, the menstrual discrimination is practicing across the country and beyond. The different names, forms. I mean, somewhere it is visible and somewhere not. Somewhere the list of the abuses or restriction is short and somewhere really long. Some of my colleagues do not agree with me because the developed countries, educated countries, or the countries from the global north are not following the menstrual discrimination. But I have so many evidences. I don't know to what extent my colleagues remember. In last December, Global South Coalition launched this book. It's a testimony of the menstrual discrimination practicing across the globe. For example, in Australia, 25% girls opted to buy the menstrual product publicly. Or 70% girls fail in a subject in a class than their friends due to the menstrual shame. Likewise, in UK, 1 in 8 women did not know about their menstruation till they experienced by themselves. Just last January, UK released a report that 9 menstruators experience anxiety out of 10 during the menstruation. And of course, Africa, Asia, for example, Burundi, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Congo, Uganda, my colleagues will speak, in Asia, Afghanistan, Bhutan, Pakistan, my country, Nepal, the different forms of menstrual discrimination is practicing. Many years, I did not know about the underlying cause of the menstrual discrimination and its impact throughout the life cycle of the menstruators. I also intensively engaged in educating, serving the communities for focusing on hygiene, toilet, or clean set. I advocate by myself. But later I realized that it's wrong. Because the sole intervention on menstrual hygiene or menstrual product or menstrual health or a clean set are not solution at all. These are the important elements for the dignified menstruation, but these practices have not been addressing the dignity during the menstruation and beyond. So really more than 3 decades struggle. Along with my team members, I realized that our stories, success, struggles, pain, sufferings are often manipulated, assumed, misinterpreted. For example, if you Google, the Chhaupadi is a kind of synonyms for Nepal. Actually, Chhaupadi is only a kind of name where only the name which is been using for menstruation in few parts of the Western Nepal. So without putting dignity at center, the impossible to address the menstrual discrimination too. So as a survivor of the menstrual discrimination, I inspired from the challenges and initiated the Dignified Menstruation campaign at the global. I'm so lucky without having any funding. My friends, Lakshman, Esther, so many others joined the hands, and we are collectively working with relentlessly to assure the dignity of the menstruators throughout the life cycle. It's a kind of paradigm shift to re-examining our past and reimagining our future, especially from the perspective of development, human rights, and feminism. Also, it is a reclaiming of our rights. As we believe, and chanting, I say chanting, I repeat again, chanting is a human rights under the Human Rights Declaration 1948 or CEDAW 1979 or recently SDGs. So I think I keep talking. I don't know whether I continue or not. Since 29, we started the Global South Coalition for Dignified Menstruation, and currently we have been working in different 9 chapters in 11 countries, namely Australia, Bangladesh. We recently have friends from Bangladesh, Indonesia, Philippines, Sri Lanka, Uganda, UK, USA, and the members are joining all around the globe. Let me stop right now here. I will come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Radhaji. That's brilliant. I think the importance of looking at the issue of menstruation and the dignity of human being who menstruate is extremely important from the human rights framework. And even the Human Rights Declaration starts with the word dignity itself. And I think that's very, very important in this conversation to highlight. And I'm still learning the agenda as well as non-menstruator, but I'm figuring out my own role in the conversation. But I think what you bring, the work that we are seeing in the development sector around menstrual hygiene and products and access to the product are only looking at the surface of the problem, not looking at addressing the root of the problem. I think your clear message on we will not solve the problem if we only look at the superficial aspects, but rather we need to go down and deep. And I believe the issue of dignity of people who menstruate is actually at the root of any forms of discrimination that is attached to the body of women as such. And it connects with the autonomy issue, the consent issue, the rights issue very, very much. And I think, and also the important point I always find inspirational for me is the misinterpretation that happens around women's body. And it doesn't apply in Global South only. It is. I am in the US and I see that all the time happening, even in a country like US where we presume to be, sort of developed. But I still see even the roots present in the so-called developed countries. I saw that in Europe when I was living there. I'm seeing that in the US. I see that in Africa. I see that in Middle East. I see that in South Asia. I see that in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. So it's a global issue, and I think, and I think sometimes the global development work is led by people, or supposed to be led by people in global north. And I think it's also time that we flip the coin around to talk about more bottom-up leadership from the right holders' perspective. And that doesn't mean global south to become hegemony or become dominant, but it's a new way of looking at development and human rights as an agenda. Thank you for highlighting that. So now with this, I'd like to bring Mili and Esther as well in the conversation. So you both are located in Africa and North America. And we'd love to hear from Mili, since I already brought on the developed part where you are located right now. So tell us, what is it that brought you or ignite you to be part of this movement? And I think, and your passion behind why you are engaging in this work.
Thank you so much. It's really funny when I look back at my own personal journey into really a sort of an enlightenment into dignified menstruation. I had been doing work around sexual health and reproductive justice and equity sort of all my life. And that began really because I felt, coming from a culture that can be a little bit more socially conservative, coming from, immigrating from Nepal, living there for about 10 years, then moving to the US and sort of dealing with that immigration journey and the culture shock of it all. I felt that there was a lack of access to holistic and non-judgmental and accessible sexual health and care. And that led a lot into the same things that we're talking about now, which is discrimination against menstruators and against bodies in general. And this sort of, I saw in my high school years and in my college years, this really large social stigma and shame and discrimination against sex and against pleasure and sexual health. And so I've always been really into that and doing that work and, working a lot in sexual education. But it's so funny. I've done so much work in my college years, teaching sex ed, really doing a lot of work in HIV counseling and being and conducting HIV tests. But it's when I met Radha that I sort of connected that missing piece within sexual health, within eliminating gender-based violence, working towards, positive and informational and non-judgmental sexual health, is that we're not talking about menses. We're not talking about menstruation. And so in my journey, looking for Radha, finding her in Nepal, doing work with her, and we conducted research while we were in Nepal. We did it in Jumla, in the western part of Nepal, where, there's a lot of talk about Chopadi, like Radha mentioned. Then we moved on to doing research, looking at the construction of power amongst Nepali men, Nepali political men, actually, and how that relates to gender-based violence, such as rape and sexual assault and menstrual discrimination restrictions. As Radha already mentioned, because we consider this to be a form of gender-based violence. So in my work with Radha, that's really when I was enlightened and I found the missing piece, and I found, wow, we have really been looking at the consequences of a problem, but not at the root. And so, I've been doing all this work around sex ed, but never mentioning menstruation once in any of my classes. And so that's when I really became, really involved in this work. And this is life work, because as a menstruator, I am obviously personally invested in this, because even before birth, I have been a part of a menstrual cycle. And therefore, all my life and even beyond death, I will be a part of the menstrual cycle. And therefore, there's that imperative need to look for that dignity and to obtain that dignity so that I can live my full life cycle and everybody else along with that. And also understanding that beyond just the menstruator, what is the investment for non-menstruators? And it's that this is really for the better of society as a whole. And therefore, every single being, whether you menstruate or not, should be invested in eliminating discrimination against menstruation and working toward achieving that dignified menstruation. So from Nepal, I've continued on that work, and we really tried to establish this global coalition. And I'm so excited and proud and hopeful for the future in really achieving and continuing to cultivate and amplify this global community that holds this shared understanding of, discrimination and violence, and how insidious this is, and how it really has so many different layers, from, the intrapersonal, how do you feel with your relationship with menses, to the interpersonal, how does Esther feel? How does Radha feel? How does Lakshman feel? To the structural, the political, educational, health sector. In every sector, we're seeing discrimination against menstruation, and we see the violence that it creates and imposes and the consequences. So, all those reasons is really why I'm so deeply invested in this work, and it really will continue to do this work throughout my life, and hopefully in my studies as well.
Esther, over to you.
Let me share my story briefly. I come from a family of 7 boys and 2 girls. So growing up, it was me and my mom until my last born was born. Incidentally, she was a girl. She's a girl. So my mom kind of did not share so much about menstruation. And as I grew up to become a girl, when I started menstruating, of course, I went through those cultural moments where you are initiated. So I was told you'll be menstruating only 3 days. So from that time on, I have never worn a sanitary pad. She taught me how to be clean using cloth during menstruation. So my dad is someone who had never talked about menstruation at all until today. I have never heard him talking about menstruation. My brothers, I don't know how they've managed to manage their families and their children. But I, growing up, I did not hear anything from my father about menstruation. So as I started the youth center, I got interested in sharing knowledge on sexual reproductive health, but mainly about menstruation, because I realized the community where I live in, it was a taboo to talk about menstruation. Most of this work is left to the school matrons, to the teachers in school, to the auntie. In our culture, there's a special auntie who talks about such issues. So I took interest into sharing information with these young people, including the boys, letting them know about menstruation, reproductive health, the system, and the menstruation. But as I went along sharing all this information, I have never thought of the dignity, by the way, until I met Rada. So that was 2 years ago. I had not looked at the dignity, like, because I grew up without any pad, any bought pad. I was using clothes throughout my life until I met my husband. So it's when I started feeling the value of a woman, because every month he would go and buy me pads and make sure I'm okay. So when I got into the Global South Coalition, I got to know more about the dignity bit. Then I started doing some bit of research and reading on our policies in Uganda and how much NGOs are doing on menstruation management. That is a bit of lacking in our policies, but there's certainly a lot of work that is being done here in Uganda. So I enjoy doing it. I like doing it because I know it's a right to every woman in helping them or supporting the woman to achieve their full potential. Yeah.
Thank you, Esther. And colleagues, feel free to share your stories in the chat box as well. So the idea is that we can connect more broadly with all of you as well. It's not that only those who are speaking that you have to listen to, but you can, share your own thoughts, questions if you have any with regards to what we are sharing, our own stories. Tell us your stories. It's all of our stories that really matter. So I think for me also, in terms of joining with colleagues here, is my own story of how I reflect, and in the book that Radhaji talked about, I have shared my own story of how I have come to know about this issue and what have been my feelings and the challenges in the context where I come from, with being part of the Hindu family structure and a very patriarchal structure that comes with being Hindu in a typical way. And sort of, how we as boys were not allowed to even know about what happens to women's body. And then, looking at, what my mothers would be suffering from, and then, sort of doing, and now I'm reflecting more on what that means vis-a-vis how the patriarchy works in terms of, forcing women to feel like they are secondary human beings or humans as such, as a part of the structure, either in the name of culture, in the name of religion, in the name of safety. And that's what some of the international development work, when it comes to, when I was involved with sexual and reproductive health and rights, in particular looking at the comprehensive sexuality education, I still remember we never talked about menstruation and the bodily autonomy, and what is human rights in that sense. But we only talked about the importance of having the knowledge, but knowledge about own body. But then we don't talk about what is happening with the body became an issue. And I think, since then, I have been really interested and with the inspiration from colleagues like, Radhaji to start with, but also Esther, Mili, all of you who are doing this work in your own context, and learning and realizing the role I can play myself and how I can change and begin this, change process in my own family. And I've been learning so much also from my own partner to also get the first-hand experience and understanding of what happens, how can I support, and bring that knowledge to also call out to other men and boys. And you may be noticing that we are using term menstruators and non-menstruators. That is also very critical from an inclusive perspective, because we don't want to use and go after the same stereotypical gender men versus women approach. Rather, we are inclusive in the sense that when we say menstruator, we do include trans men and anyone else who would menstruate throughout their lives, and also those who go through the process of menstruation, and that we are talking about dignity and human rights of all people. And also, when you look at the root cause of why so much of stigma, so much of discrimination, so much of violence, so much of oppression happens on just because of the body, is rooted in how historically patriarchy has been operated, right? And how that keeps on reinforcing the power dynamics, or the reinforcing the patriarchal power and sense of entitlement and privilege among boys and men, or those who don't menstruate in general feel about and their sense of authority over women's body is a big issue. And we need to speak out and call out to people who have that attitude, so that we actually ground our realities, irrespective we talk about other issues like unpaid care work, or talk about sexual and reproductive health in the traditional way we have been talking about. Until and unless we know, if we are addressing the root causes that keeps reinforcing the same privilege for non-menstruators, the same power dynamics between menstruators and non-menstruators, we will not be solving or moving a needle towards equality and justice that either the SDGs or UN frameworks or human rights frameworks talk about, but also there are challenges to that. So I believe there is a particular role also that we as non-menstruators can play. But first and foremost, the last point before I again hand it back to the colleagues to share is that our role is also to be there, not only as leaders, but as fellow, be there in an accountable way, and what by listening to the experiences and what is needed for, from the menstruators. So I think it's also looking at toppling down the way patriarchy has been operating in the traditional sense. So that's my story on how I am involved and what I'm doing, and I'll come back as well. So Radhaji, if you want to add anything from your side, you have already shared your story, but now building on to what we have already shared, to think about the politics of the work. We always see, even at the political level or policy level, we do not see dignity at the center when it comes to even within the feminist movement. As you said, no, not all feminist movements are happy with the way you try to articulate the dignity at the center around human rights and mensurators, equality and justice. So yeah, if you can elaborate a little more on that part.
Yeah, thank you. Let me go back on 1973 when the old, especially it started from the Boston University, the feminism movement, our body, our lives, our body movement. Since then, we started to talk about our body. We focus on the contraceptives, HIV, AIDS, sex education, but we do not talk about the menstruation. Not only in Nepal, across the globe, who are claiming and doing for the feminism, they also do not like the way we are speaking up. They in their movement or campaign or daily conversation, they do not like to talk about the menstruation. That means menstruation is missing. First, we need to understand how the menstrual discrimination construct the power since childhood. Without knowing that fact, it is difficult to understand. This is how I understood. About 6 to 12 years, no matter whether the child in USA or in Nepal, they know something about menstruation from their mother, sisters, neighborhood, or media. And they learn the taboos, the stigma, restriction, discrimination. As a result, the girls considered herself as a powerless, inferior, and also learn that she has to remain silent. There is no authority to ask the question to her parents, to her brothers. In the meantime, the boys consider themselves powerful, privileged, and they started to misuse or perpetuate their powers. And the girls who cannot ask the question to their family members, they could not ask or could not challenge at school for the bad touch or any kind of sexual abuse, or cannot challenge or say no with the co-workers in office or partner in future. So on the other side of the coin, the boys started, they continuously socialize in a way that they have so much privilege and power, and they became rapists. It sounds bad. I don't like to use that word, but this is the reality. This is how our society is grown up, no matter where we are. So today, the home is not safe at all. Last year, just last April, the UN General Secretary declared that the women, the girls, and the LGBTQIs are living in a sad pandemic before having the COVID. That means they experience the various forms of sexual and gender-based violence. This is our reality. In other side, since 1948, we started to keep talking about the human rights. And particularly from 1979, when we have a CEDAW, then we started talking about the women's right. There are so many movement and so much money, so much time we spent already, but there is no menstruation at all. So the construction of the power or the underlying cause of sexual and gender-based violence is missing. We keep talking about the sexual and reproductive rights. Many colleagues, many scholars claim that we have been working on menstruation since 1994 when we have ICPD. In some extent, it's true. I do agree. Since then, we talk about the reproductive health, and we also acknowledge some sort of role of the men and boys over there. But without talking about the menstruation, how could we talk about the sex education, whether my sex is safe or not? Or if my sex is unsafe, how could I seek the support for the emergency contraceptives or the safe abortion? There are many examples. Let me give an example from my country. The percentage of the unsafe abortion is higher than the safe abortion. And the safe abortion is legalized since 2002. So we can see that mismatch. How the menstrual discrimination play is a barrier to seek the sexual and reproductive rights. Or how the menstrual discrimination play a vital role for sexual and gender-based violence since home, school, everywhere. So these kind of things are missing, and not only in Nepal. Today, I just wrote one question to the General Secretary of UN. They are asking for the open question questions for the open question answer session with the General Secretary. They talk about the hygiene. They talk about the stopping rape or stopping sexual abuse or violence, but they don't like to touch the menstrual discrimination. Forget about the Nepal. Though we lost so many women because of the menstrual discrimination, severe form of menstrual discrimination, and the government recently come up with the policies, the law, and other activities to promote the dignified menstruation and country make menstrual health free country. But it's still the menstrual dignity or dignified menstruation is still not a debate issue for the public debate. If you go through the organization, the NGOs have been working on human rights, women's rights, or ending or eliminating sexual and gender-based violence. This is the common feature we can find in Nepal and across the globe. But they are not incorporating the word of menstruation. And if they use, they only talk about the physiology of the menstruation. Even that kind of situation is happening in Australia, even in the Canada. In Canada, I saw the friends from Canada, Austria, on our live chat. In Canada, 63% menstruators do not like to go to the work or the public space during the menstruation. See why it is happening. So this is how it's all about the political issue, and the political leaders or the government announcing for the easy things like free distribution of the menstrual pad. They don't think about to what extent that menstrual product or that pad is towards the menstrual dignity, whether it is good for the health of the menstruators in terms of whether there is a chemical or not, whether it is protecting our environment or not, or they only focus on the distribution of the pad and also tax, waiving the or reducing the tax. These tax and the free distributions of the menstrual products are also important, but again, they are not guaranteeing the dignity of the menstruators. Let me give another example from Kenya. In last 2019 September, one 14-year-old girl committed suicide when she had a menstruation at school because of the teasing from her classmates and the teacher. Where the government started to distribute the sanitary pad since 2017. So that example, that anecdotal reports clearly reveal that it's all about the power, and we are not ready to talk about it. It connects with the, because the menstruation is a very multifaceted, very complex. It has a strong connection with the politics, connection with the economics, connection with the religions, and people don't like to talk about the religions. I saw the comment from Maria. She just left. I saw the notice. We are not ready to have a dialogue with the religious leaders or religious scriptures. What we have been practicing. Most of the feminists or NGO workers or even the men champions, they are so vocal in delivering the trainings on human rights or feminism, but they are not ready to hold the accountability at their personal and the professional life. Unless and until we don't hold the accountability, we don't show the role model, it is not possible. So in many ways, it is a really political issue. Because we have to see, we have to analyze the immediate and long-term negative consequences of the menstruators throughout the life cycle. In many countries, the sex-selective abortion is very rampant. Why the sex-selective abortion is happening? We need to go in very deep level. I have a conflict with my friends. Nowadays, I have a strong feeling that what is patriarchy? It's very invisible. We don't know. We have so many scriptures, so many textbooks, so many debates, but how that notion, how that system or practice came into the civilization process. what is the demarcation or contributing factors to practice that way. So nowadays I have a feeling that it is because of the menstruation. While going through the definition of the Aristotle's or medieval time or even the modern era, I have been trying to understand from the various perspective of the scientist, feminist towards the menstruation. I have a strong feeling that the patriarchal mindset emerges from the symbol of the uterus or the menstruation, and that part we miss throughout our development, human rights, and feminism discourse. Though we need to do the research, and through this presentation, I urge to my colleagues, academicians, the NGOs, donors, to dig out the issue, which is the first. The patriarchy is first or the menstruation. So this is the opportunity. We need to work on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Radhaji. And yeah, I say thank you, colleagues, for sharing your thoughts in the chat box. I see Ashley did bring the issue of, the religion and how that impacts on, and the question is, without having them overstate their religion, is that even possible? So I think, how can we empower religious person? So I think in the work, there are some examples that we can come to. And also, agree with Mari's comment around stigma, as we all said. Thank you, Sapnaji, for sharing your thoughts. But now, since Radhaji already started around the experiences, so I'd like to go to Esther. Esther, please share from what you have been doing so far and what have been the key learnings coming out from your work in the ground that we can really look into. As Radhaji said, we need to have evidence, but I think evidence needs to be understood differently as well. We can't go away with the same, sort of traditional way of looking at evidence, which is very academic, very inaccessible to general public. But, tell us your story, because I think stories are quite strong evidences from the ground.
Thank you so much, Laxman. In Uganda, Kawempe Youth Center is located in Alaban slum. So as an organization, we've been doing menstruation management talks, health talks with young people especially. And once in a while, we have parents come in, but like I shared, the first challenge we have as we do these sessions in our communities is parents don't want to be part of this kind of thing. They still think it's a taboo. And then somehow the girls will figure out how to live. Like they usually say, if I leave, they will leave. So we still have that challenge, but as a center in the community, we continue to have girls with the boys in the community, but also work along with schools. Then the challenge with schools, we've been we've been trying to lobby the government to pass the sexuality education policy in our country. So for the last 4 years, I've joined other CSOs to participate in dialogues, in advocacy meetings, where we are calling on the government to pass the sexuality education policy so that we are given an opportunity to penetrate schools and be able to conduct information sharing sessions on sexual education. So I'm very sure that once that is passed, as a center, we shall be able to do a lot in the schools. Then as a Global South Coalition, Uganda chapter, I work with 4 other people, but every one of them has an NGO in the different parts of Kampala and Uganda actually, and many of them are focused on first of all, they are passionate about menstruation, menstruation health, hygiene, management. So they usually do activities in their communities and they share with us some of the work that they do. My biggest challenge at the moment as a chapter, which is about 1 year old now, we are struggling with meeting together. we have so many actors that are doing menstruation hygiene management, so many of them in Uganda. But the challenge is they are so busy doing a lot of work and sensitizing communities, and we rarely come together as one to do this kind of work. So as a chapter, for me, that is a challenge, and I'm trying to bring people on board to work together. Otherwise, as organizations per member in the chapter, they are doing a lot of sensitizing communities on menstruation hygiene. So that is where we are at in Uganda. I am very sure that if we have I don't know how we can help our members to actually think beyond the management, think beyond the hygiene, and look at the dignity and the human rights perspective of menstruation. So I think we have a lot of work to do in Uganda. Like I said, and I've been saying, there's already a lot of work that is being done on menstruation hygiene management, but we still have a lot of work to do. Yeah.
Thank you, Esther. Very inspiring on what you are initiating in Uganda. And we'll come back to listen on after that, after we hear.
And I forgot to mention, sorry, I forgot to mention that during COVID, we noted that many of the girls in my community were being abused. Many of them were, all of us were in that lockdown, and many of them just got married. So we already have numbers that have increased of so many young people that have been forced into marriages just because they started menstruating. Many parents feel that the girls should just go ahead and get married since there's no more money for school fees, and they don't have jobs, so let them go and marry off. Recently, I got a girl, and she's actually disabled, and the mother is tired. The mother and the father are so tired of staying with her in the house, and they sent her to me because they think I'm now in a better position. Being a counselor, I'm in a better position to find a husband for her. So, because they feel she has grown in this 1 year of the lockdown, they feel she's ready for marriage. So this is what is happening in our communities, and we had a session with the girls to talk about how they feel and about COVID, and how they've managed to manage their menstrual hygiene period, those monthly periods, and they shared a lot about their challenges. Many of them had so many relatives in the houses, and they didn't have privacy. We don't have, being in a slum, we don't have good disposal of waste. So we had challenges during the lockdown. Yeah.
Exactly. So that brings why this agenda is so multifaceted. And I think the importance of looking at it from a holistic perspective, and then the centers around the human rights issue of our girl child, in that sense, who is now entering into this phase of the life. Miliji, what has been your experiences being located in global north, especially the Northern American side? Tell us what you have been doing, what's been learnings coming out from what you are doing in your context.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Esther, for sharing parts of Uganda and your experience there. I think that when, being in a place where this is considered to be really, the developed country, and it's considered to be there's a lot of presumption about what kind of liberations and what kind of, freedom there is here in terms of, in any sector really, but even when it comes to sexual health, reproductive care, and menstruation. So as somebody who started menstruating in America, as a part of the Nepali culture, I was restricted from going into my kitchen and into the prayer room. And so, there was that initial sort of a cultural component where that's where I, really touch base personally with menstrual discrimination and restriction. But I will say that at that time, not having to wash dishes and not having to go in the kitchen and help was something that I took as a positive thing. However, because I was being restricted, and because I knew that there was this sort of a shame and stigma around my menses or my menarche when I first started menstruating, even though the actual act of it was something that I didn't think about at the time, the reflection on it was that it made me feel that I should be ashamed of my menses and that it's something that I need to hide. And this was sort of an interesting that I've been reflecting on, is that even though as a Nepali girl in our cultural activities, I was restricted in my first menarche, and that's kind of what initiated my understanding of menstrual restrictions. My friends in school, they were American or Hispanic from different cultures, and while they were not restricted in that physical way in their homes, they also felt the same. They felt that same shame and stigma and taboo. They felt that they should be ashamed of their menses, that we should not talk about it. I do not remember talking about my menses with my friends or in school. I remember hiding menstrual products in my sleeves in schools because we knew that we would get teased. I knew that in my elementary school years, that's the first time I was ever taught about menstruation in my school, but it was separate. All the menstruators, all the girls were in one room and all the boys were put in another room, and they were allowed to play free. So initially you see how the structure around menses and the structural component to it plays into effect, because starting early on, you notice those behaviors from the other menstruators in your home, and then you notice it from school when you're separated, and the boys or the cis men are told to go play outside while the menstruators are told to stay in their room and don't tell nobody about this. So here, it's really understanding that, in the global north, because they've already done so much work around health and hygiene, because we know that, it's really a sort of the menstrual movement is, or has been predominantly been pushed by the global north. And because they've focused on the health and hygiene, and they have the sort of this white savior mentality of thinking that, those people in the global south need pads and tampons and menstrual products, and they need to clean themselves. And since that has been that focus, and we're not saying that's not important. However, because that's been the focus in the global north, specifically in USA and here in North America chapters, you see that it's really that menstruation and menstrual discrimination exists due to that inherent misogynistic and sexist values perpetrated by patriarchy, and it serves to uphold and create that social system that labels menstruation and menstruators as inferior and impedes on menstruators' inalienable human right to dignity. And you see that in a sort of insidious way in forms of social stigma, financial and economic discrimination, or the burden and the lack of menstrual education and bodily literacy. So we know that menstruation is really a social stigma in globally, but also in these developed countries. So earlier, like Radha said, if we're talking about the global north countries, we have Canada, where 63% of people menstruators have felt they have to hide about their tampons and pads that are brought into school, at work, or school. 38.9% were late for school or left school early, or the ability to learning was impacted in a survey done here in the United States. 1 in 3 menstruators are still skipping school during menses due to stigma in Mexico. And, people are reporting that this is due to them feeling ashamed about their menses, because inherently they have, sort of internalized that belief that menses is impure and dirty, and that therefore so are they. So, what these facts and statistics tell us is that it restricts menstruators from speaking about menses in the public and private spaces. And so it also results in that absence of menses, or, the condition of menstruation, as a public health and social justice issue. So we see that it's not even considered an issue because we don't talk about the health and hygiene, because, it's considered in developed countries that it's already there. So then we just never have an opportunity to talk about the stigma. In other forms, you see that as a social stigma because of the use of euphemisms, right? We use euphemisms, we don't say menstruation or menses. And if you notice, to all of our viewers, we use words such as menses and menstruation because these are the proper words for menses and menstruation. But you hear that we use time of the month, period, female troubles, Aunt Flo, on the rag, the red, right? So we use these sort of euphemisms because, and what it results in is really further stigmatizing menstruation by using indirect words, as if menses is a dirty word to say, as if it's, it's improper for me to say I'm on my menses or I'm menstruating, but it's okay for me to say I'm on my period because it sounds better maybe. And so further on, the use of these euphemisms also alienates menstruators who don't identify as a woman or as a female. And so that's another reason why I'm so happy you brought that up earlier, Lakshman, is that, we use words as menstruators and non-menstruators because we're specifically concerned about the actual menses part, and everybody falls into one of those categories. Further, really looking at menstruation as that stigmatization, we see that it's stigmatized in multiple different layers here. It's considered really abomination of the body, blemishes of an individual character, and really is a tribal identifier or marker of a marginalized group, and that's menstruators. We know that if someone is menstruating, we automatically put them in the group of menstruators, even if we're not actually doing it, consciously, but subconsciously we are. And so then we're already creating those groups in our head, and therefore we're labeling menstruators as, as less than. So we see all these kind of play out. And in my current work, really as a reproductive health specialist, Planned Parenthood, I see that, the use of these euphemisms and use of these social stigmas where there's that silence around menstruation, then further propels into silence about anything regarding the body, really, but specifically sexual and reproductive health. If you cannot say menstruation or menses, then we will not be able to say vulva and vagina and uterus and fallopian tubes and, services. We won't be able to say those words, and we won't be able to get access to care. And I don't know if that's the same for you, Esther, but, and obviously Radha too in Nepal, but here it's so hard to get folks to say what it is they come in for the issue, and especially for menstruation as well. We're just sort of lost. We know that it's a vital fifth element, and therefore we're still lost in how it can really assist us. Secondary, in the North America, you see there's so much of that lack of bodily literacy. So there's that lack of medically accurate sexual and reproductive health education, along with really just no or a little menstrual education. In the United States, out of the 50 states we have, only 22 states require a medically accurate sexual education in public schools. I'm sorry, but when I go into school and I'm listening to my teacher, I'm hoping that it's all medically accurate, or that it's accurate in any sense, that this is something that is true, not an opinion of my teacher. Right? You have all these biases, and it's allowed legally. Only 22 states are required to have a medically accurate sexual education. And this is how you end up with, sex ed that just primarily is really fear mongering, and it's also all about abstinence, right? So in Canada, there's about half of the schools don't meet international standards or have best practices or meet their own 2019 Canadian guidelines for sexual education. So you see, there's that. This is state-sanctioned violence to not know about menstruation and to not know about menses, to not be taught about that. It is state-sanctioned violence to, prevent that education, to access to that education, so that one can have that bodily literacy and have that bodily autonomy. And so there's really that disempowerment to obtain access to necessary health services and to live that dignified life daily, to feel empowered, to feel that they are able to that they're able to do whatever it is that they want to do in any time of their menstrual cycle. And I always tell my patients as well, we're always in our menstrual cycle, in some part of it, right? As a menstruator, you're always in some part of the menstrual cycle itself. And so it's not all just about those bleeding days. Lastly, you see, and this is something that in the United States, they do a lot of work around, which is period poverty, if you've heard of that. It's really that idea that, because there's that big financial burden on menstrual products. And, in a lot of states here in the United States, we have this special luxury tax on pads, on tampons, on menstrual products. And so there's a lot of movement here to eliminate that. But again, it stops at that, at providing the pad. it stops at that always, because again, we're missing that centering dignity. And so here in our chapter, that's where we focus on, and we do a lot of work around education and awareness. So we have about 6-7 members here in the North America chapter, and we mainly run our social media sites, have a website that's coming up as well. And so one other thing I wanted to point out in terms of the social burden of the menstrual products that I see here is that, menstrual products are again used as an avenue to reiterate that menstrual blood is a social taboo, and it's the menstruator's responsibility to hide such taboo. And you see that's reflected by, for me personally, I see so many patients who from various ranges of their life and ages, they're ashamed that they're bleeding, or they'll be ashamed that they're menstruating, or they don't want to talk about their menses. Mm-hmm. And so there's that social burden along with that financial burden. And so because of this, again, it's just re-emphasizing the idea that menstruation is dirty, that menses is something that we need to hide. And so it just becomes that, global culture and that cycle. So it's very cyclic, that violence and discrimination. And so we're doing a lot of work around empowering and eliminating and building awareness, but it needs to also come from a structural point as well. As we are a grassroots organization working from the ground up. But, events such as this really amplify our message so that we can gain more supporters and, dignified menstruators and work towards that.
Exactly. Thank you, Milizi. So many things that, resonate with what you, Esther, Mili, and Babaji, shared about. And one thing that really struck that was coming from all three of you is this capitalist model to the service delivery approach around the products. I think that's also to do with, the part on the capitalist ideology that shapes on providing services, even on with regards to producing and making pads available for people in general. And the capitalist model that revolves around this production and the kind of lobby these business people do when it comes to then looking at making sanitary pads free, for example, or tax free, for example, becomes a huge challenge because there's so much of lobbying happening around. And I think for also as non-menstruator, for me also, the language really matters. And when you were all sharing, I also got reminded of in Nepal, we use the word, in English, in the US, we see, periods or that time of the month kind of, but in Nepal, we have even more terrifying word, so to say, which is called nochune, which is like, you are untouchable during that period. So you are not supposed to be touched, or you are not supposed to be touching anyone else, right. Which even further goes into, sort of demoralizing even the sense of I'm a full human being among women. And that happens, as Emmanuel, you said in the chat, that it happens from the very, very early age. It certainly doesn't happen when someone becomes age of 18. It happens from even before birth, if you look at it from a sex selection abortion perspective. But also, as soon as the girl child is born, the girl child is then given that kind of message. And I think the stigma, and even if these young people ask about these issues, the way the parents would respond to them saying, oh, that's not your business, to the boys, and then to the girls, oh, it's not your time, you should know about this, and then keep on hiding and not give them information as they would need in terms of their age appropriateness. And in that sense, I think it's very, very important to also work with our own kids to demystify this myths and stigma. And that's what I do with my own child as well, is we provide, both me and my partner provide him with appropriate, as much as we know, information about this, so that the myth and the stigma attached to it can be debunked from the very beginning, and young boys can start talking about it in an open way. That can also give a sense to fellow menstruators or their colleagues in school. Now he is in teenage, and the way he then relates to his fellow in the classroom becomes an important issue. And I think, and because of the stigma and discrimination attached to it, and hence the lack of literacy there, is the proper. And then the most important part, when I was, when I came to the US and I started talking with some of the friends who work in natural hygiene sector and sexual and reproductive health sector, and youth, colleagues and advocates for youth who do have very strong and quite elaborated, comprehensive sexuality education program. And I asked some of the female colleagues in Save the Children who do this work in menstrual hygiene, have you seen any men in the US context buying a sanitary pad for their partners? And they was like, what are you asking? I haven't really thought about it. And they go and say, actually, I haven't seen that. And I was like, okay, and do you even talk with your partner around ask that, you may be going through a pain, and have you ever asked your boyfriend, if you are in a heterosexual marriage, to go and buy a sanitary pad for you? There was no one who said yes. And that tells the story of how much of stigma is attached to women's body and what happens. And I think it's important for breaking this silence, the culture of silence around women's body becomes an important piece in the conversation as well. So I think with that, I'm also, there's so much to talk about. But I think moving on to again, now since the symposium is more around how do we bring men and boys on board on this. So any concrete message that you would like to give to non-menstruators out here, including myself, on what is it that you think is or needs to be done by us to amplify this agenda more and make it more political? What is your key message there? Maybe we start with Esther, and then go to Miliji and Radhaji, and then we'll go into concluding the conversation with the sum of the call for action. Esther.
Thank you so much, Laxman. I think it's very important for boys and men to know that menstruation is a human right. And once they get to know this, it will be easy to bring them on board. It's a process. For example, in Uganda, men, boys, in some communities, in the different cultures, given our community or our country that has over 40 tribes, all of us have our cultures. It's very important to bring all these men on board slowly as a process. It's okay to have the conversation about gender equality and to help the men understand that without them, there's no way women can fulfill their potential. So I think it's very important for example, the chapters to work together with this already established CSOs and the structures in place to raise awareness on the need to help women or to help men understand that menstruation is a human issue. So if these politicians don't understand that, they will go ahead to plan for good roads, they will go ahead to plan for buildings, they will go ahead to sit in meetings and talk about constructing toilets without knowing that the other missing link, the dignity itself. So it's very important for us as CSO with chapters in the different countries to raise our voices on the need of dignity during menstruation. This will help the men come on board if we do that. So it's very important for us to do that.
Thank you, Esther. Miliji.
I always laugh a little bit whenever I think about, when we think about how can we engage men and boys in the conversation around dignified menstruation or any other really social justice issue, right? We know, and we've been, again and again, we always say, we know where the power lies due to the structure, right? We know that, due to the patriarchal structure, the power inherently just lies in or with the men and boys because of the way the system is created and the way that our social values are implemented even now. So first, I think is really important to understand the physiological of menses and menstruation. So that's that men and boys need to be educated on the physiological, but also on the social structure of menstruation and menstrual discrimination. And then, it's sort of all of our responsibility to try to achieve a better life for all of us is really my motto, right? And so for that, I think it's to have that ownership that dignified menstruation is not just something I'm doing for a menstruator. I'm not doing this for somebody. It has to be something that, non-menstruators are internalizing as their own responsibility and duty to work towards eliminating violence against menstruators, because we know that this impacts society as a whole and also non-menstruators. Not only do menstruators struggle to talk about their bodies, so do non-menstruators. We have patients, my work has really given me a lot of reflection, private reflection on people's internal thoughts. And so, non-menstruators are also impacted by this. You don't know how, somebody that, you are interacting with different bodies every single day. So you are going to be interacting with menstruators in any level, personal to professional, community level, in any level. So the fact that you are lacking that education, you should be angry. You should be angry that you don't know as well. You should be angry that you don't know about menstruation, that you don't, are not given that opportunity to support, to be part of a movement that eliminates that violence, and that understanding that obtaining that dignity and working towards that will ultimately result in a better society for all of us, and also will result in a better relationship between non-menstruators and menstruators, in any level. And, in the political realm that you're talking about, we need recognition. Everything starts with recognition and then starts with allocating resources. In Global South Coalition, we have a running campaign that we are trying to have the UN recognize, menstruation as a gender-based violence and not just menstrual discrimination as a harmful cultural or traditional practices, when we know that this exists globally and we're talking about it all the time. But why has the United Nations not recognized it? So in the political realm, it has to first be recognized and to be prioritized. We're talking about the shadow pandemic, yet you don't talk about menstruation. Again, we're failing in every level to name the thing and to work towards it and put resources, put money, give the marginalized folks and the people that are the most impacted the voices to share their stories, so that we can, other folks can learn, listen, and so then we can work towards that. So I think we're still a long ways, but I think politically, until it is recognized by an international entity, it is, almost impossible for smaller governmental entities to recognize it and work towards it. Because as we know, we like to have that overreaching, big brother sort of let us, to guide us. And, while Nepal has been one of the countries to recognize dignified menstruation as a national issue and to work towards it, it needs to happen in every level. And I think that we can get there faster if it is recognized by an international entity. And even when it's not, we are still doing the work. But I truly believe that.
Yeah, that's the spirit. I guess that's why the importance of Global South leadership in this work is not that we only want international big players, so-called,
exactly,
to own this, but we need to own this agenda and make it that everyone hears this agenda.
Right. Please do not appropriate. Right. Just to add on, please do not appropriate it. Please just recognize it and give us the space that we need. Right. And we're going to create that. We're going to cultivate that space anyways, in any way and how. But if you would like to join hands and be in the right side of history for, once, then please.
Yeah. That is it. You need to unmute. You're muted.
I do agree with my colleagues Esther and Millie. Again, I like to recall the power construction notion, and also like to recall the home is not safe because of the non-family main members globally. As a partner, as a husband, as a uncle, father, grandfather, so on. So we should not hide this kind of fact we have been living today. And whenever we talk about the engagement of boys, or role of the boys and men for dignified menstruation, I always see from the perspective of the reconstruction of the power. Today, because of the silence, deep silence and the deep ignorance on menstruation and its multifaceted nature, the girls, simply I use the word of the girls, but the girls, women, LGBTQI, disabled, women with a disability, there are subcategories as well. They converted as a victim, and boys converted as a perpetrators. This is another reality. That is why we need to work in two levels, the micro level and the macro level. In the micro level, we have to start the dialogue throughout our life cycle. As you shared earlier with your young son, let's talk about the menstruation at home. If the boys realize that this universe exists because of the menstruation, or they born because of the menstruation, this is the very powerful notion. The boys should not respect me because I'm is there like sister or mother or someone. No, the boys may not have the sisters, brother, mother. They may not have the experience. They have to consider us, respect us, protect our human right as a human being, equal human being. And because of the uterus and the menstruation, we deserve more rights at the constitutional level and the international level. I mean the international human rights. That is why we deserve the dignity. So that kind of fact we need to teach among the boys since childhood. And no matter where we are, we have so many rumors, myth, misconception, mispractices associated with the menstruation regarding menstrual waste product, or only the menstrual product, or menstrual practice, or definition of the menstruation. There are so many things, and everywhere considered menstrual blood is impure and dirty. So we need to dismantle that kind of rumors, myth since home, from home, and also have to prioritize the needs and priorities of the menstruators from home. Like the boys and men can help menstruators or their family members, not only giving the money for menstrual product. There are so many activities associated since before the birth of the baby, or even after the death. Why the death ritual are different for men and boys, men and women and men. So we need to discuss that kind of things at the family level, at the micro level. In other hand, in the macro level, as Millie highlighted, the UN, the donors, the global networks like Men Engagement Alliance or Ubuntu Symposium, I urge to acknowledge the urgency of menstrual dignity. Globally, in my knowledge, the Men Engagement Alliance have been working on gender equality, gender justice, eliminating of sexual and gender-based violence, stop rape campaign, stop sexual abuse. And I'm honestly saying, I'm not happy. We are achieving some impact, but it's very nominal compared to our investment and time. They are not ready. The boys and men who hold the power from even to at the household level, they are not ready to initiate the dialogue, to incorporate the agenda of the dignified menstruation into their manifesto. Why the UN General Secretary hesitates and not directly talking about the dignified menstruation and talking about the menstrual hygiene when we start to lobby? Why CEDAW committee is still not to recognize and put the menstrual discrimination under the traditional harmful practices. How could the menstrual discrimination can address within the frame of the traditional harmful practices? I have a strongly disagreement with that idea, because at some point, half of the population of this planet has menstruated, and because of that menstruation, they have been experienced different kind of sexual and gender-based violence throughout their life cycle, from womb to tomb, and that kind of fact put under the traditional harmful practices, which is really, really very sad fact. It's not like the early marriage or FGM or something like that. The menstrual discrimination play a role, is a cause and is an effect for the many sexual and gender-based violence. For example, early marriage or child marriage. Because of the menstrual discrimination at home and at school and the public, menstruators since young childhood, they may discontinue to go to the school, or may fail, or they trap for the child marriage. Because of the child marriage, they would experience the various complications for their reproductive life, and it also impact on the their economic opportunities and throughout the life cycle. So that kind of things, how the menstrual discrimination plays as a cause and effect, that kind of things is still not recognized by the donors, by the academician, by the UN. This is the very sad fact that has to change the narratives. While changing the narratives, they have to think menstruation from impurity to purity, hygiene to dignity, 5 days business to throughout the life cycle approach business, and it is beyond the gender policy, because we have been working on gender policy, feminism, more than a half century, but we don't experience dignity during menstruation. Let me give the example from China. Last year in UN, when the COVID pandemic announced, the frontliner workers started to use the birth control pills for avoiding the menstruation. That is the very good evidence that our gender policies failed to acknowledge the needs and priorities of the menstruators. This is only one example. If you go through the intersectionality, like menstruator with the disability, there is no reading materials, there is no research, there is no funding. And how many disabled organizations working on the menstruation? It's really sad. How many transgender organizations working on the menstruation? The trans men, the queer also menstruate, and they struggle more. They struggle more than me. So that is why the researcher, the policymakers from UN to the government table, they have to consider the menstrual dignified menstruation is a priority. That means they have to allocate the adequate resources, including timing and the money, and also need to acknowledge the International Dignified Menstruation Day for the December 8th by the UN. If we all acknowledge the essence of the menstruation, it is easier to have a dialogue, and we will achieve more target in implementing SCBV or improving SRHR or promoting human rights. So, is a power holder everywhere. There is a huge role of the boys and men across the globe. Thank you.
Absolutely. So before I take some more time, Millie, we know you have to leave now. So any final quick thoughts, because we have to leave now. So any final thoughts before we leave?
Thank you so much. Well, first, thank you for this platform. And again, it's events and, platforms such as these that will continue to grow our supporters and continue to grow people to be enlightened, honestly, and to understand that this is going to be life work for every single one of us to continuously do this, either in a professional or in a community level or just personally in your own life. And for that to begin, I always say the first step is to take a look at yourself in the mirror and to realize and understand what are the biases that you hold against menstruators and menses. What have you internalized, and how do you go about deconstructing that? And that also is always going to be a lifelong business. And also, these things are not easy. I think that's what I like to leave with, is that it is not easy, but we are not asking you to do the easy thing. We are challenging you to do the hard thing, to evolve. And this is what evolution looks like in a social form, is to continuously work towards progressive, equitable, justifiable with justice, and always to center dignity. And we can implement this all throughout anything that we're doing in our life, is to center dignity and to look for dignity. So thank you so much, and please follow us on our social medias. I put it on the chat. Take care.
Thank you, Melissa. Take care. And it was lovely having you. So we'll miss you. So yeah, I think couldn't agree more on particularly looking at the role of men and boys in this struggle. I guess, based on the work we have been doing within many ways on, in my previous works, is, the learning is, because the fact that men and boys are the gatekeepers of social gender norms and patriarchy in general, there is a very, very important role that men and boys need to play to take this responsibility to debunk and dismantle the patriarchal norms that create this issue of lack of dignity for menstruators. So I think one particular reason why, even though we may not see that at an interpersonal level, one-on-one, we may see that, I'm not, stigmatizing anyone in my family, or I haven't looked at it from that way. But let's look at the macro level on how we are positioned as non-menstruator or men and boys in that sense from a gender perspective on the hierarchy up in the power, whereby we do dictate and play a role on reinforcing, recreating the social norms around menstruators and who we are as privileged individuals. So I think it's not, sufficient to look at what I am doing, but what I can play in a macro level and the role I can play. Also because men and boys can play an important role to call out fellow men and boys or non-menstruators to actually be sensitive and learn more, have more information about this topic and engage themselves in this struggle. And while doing that, though, one thing to be clarified is that the engagement of boys and men needs to be done in an accountable manner, which means we are not asking men and boys to again come to a leadership role. We are not asking men to lead. We are asking men to follow the leadership of feminist women and leaders and work and take on responsibility as it fails throughout the movement, take on responsibility with the leaders of the movement, not just go and simply run and get praised for something that we should have been doing for long back. And that's the thing we keep on hearing, that men and boys are more cherished when they speak about gender equality, which is actually something that women's life has been doing for centuries, and they hardly get recognition. And when men come in, men are certainly recognized for what they are saying, which is a common sense for a common people. But even if that gives this, again, puts men into pedestal, and that's what we want from the work with men and boys, and we want to deconstruct that, and hence the importance of accountability and working under the leadership of feminist women and feminist people. Also, the work with boys and men is not the end goal, right? The work with men and boys is to achieve something, and that something needs to be very, very clear from the beginning. We just don't want men to be joining us in marching in the street, but take on political part of this work. It's not about you showing up in the street. It's about taking responsibility to reach out and dismantle the system that we are part of. And then also to talk about, so also the issue is not very binary. It's not about men versus women or who is doing what. We all are part of or grown up in the same patriarchal mindset. And we all play a role in reinforcing and instituting the so-called socio-cultural norms and expectations in the system. So it's not about looking at, oh, it's the mother-in-laws who play more role in shaping this, right? Or mothers play a role in shaping girls' lives and so on. But it's to understand that how the patriarchy at the macro level operates to keep reinforcing and pushing certain individuals to behave in a particular way, even though we may know that this is not good, we may find repercussions for not enacting in a way that our cultures talk about, and hence the issue. And I think Radhaji, your point on why this always is sidelined, and also Esther and Mili, what they talked about. So the issue during the pandemic, the whole domestic violence, we saw how much of issues the girl children or menstruators have had faced during the COVID situation. One was because they couldn't go out. They were restricted because of this, again, social norms that women going out is not safe. Also, then there is no support system whereby they can get support for the needs that they have in particular. But also the important point is we called gender-based violence shadow pandemic, which is an irony. Why are we talking about that something that impacts women's life as a shadow pandemic, whereas it is the pandemic that has been there for centuries? And we are now sidelining in the front of COVID. We are sidelining the issues again that is most impacts the lives of women and girls, and that happens with any other agenda you name it on when it comes to women's rights and bodies. That's what happens, and that's the point. Gender-based violence is not a shadow pandemic. It was a pandemic for centuries. And what COVID did was to actually clearly show that the existing systems have huge fault lines in it. And we need to recognize and work and restructure everything, basically, and dismantle basically the power dynamics. I think that's what, and in the work with men and boys and within Menengage as well, we are still learning. But I think we are moving more towards making and understanding the politics of this work. And we will definitely highlight the importance of putting dignified maturator at the center in the politics moving forward, so that it doesn't become the harmful practice type understanding, but also the fact that harmful practices is the term that was coined by the global north hegemonic understanding of what harmful means. Harmful is very relative, right? And we need to sort of look at how we can break apart the way the international developments work is being defined. So with that, now is the time to really look at the call for action that we had from the international workshop we organized last year together with the government of Nepal and led by the Global South Coalition on Dignified Maturation. And we'll take a moment to sort of run you through the call that we have had in there. So for that, I'll be using the PowerPoint so that you have the text while we elaborate a little more on what we mean by each one of them. So that, and you can find this in the website that I put in the chat box earlier as well. There is a report from the international workshop, and you can see the broader conversation that have happened around this in the report as well. So to start with, Esther, would you like to kick us off on this part? These are the first three ones in the call for action from the international workshop. Esther?
Yes, Laxman?
Yeah. Would you like to speak?
I didn't hear you well.
Would you like to speak to these points from the declaration, from the workshop?
The screen is not clear on my part.
Oh, sorry about that. Hope it is clear for others. If not, Radhaji, would you like to start, and I'll join you as well? I know you have sore throat and sorry, the toothache happening. Not sure if you still can take it on. You are muted. You need to unmute. You are still muted, Radhaji.
Yes, Laxman. What were you saying?
Now, Esther, now we are moving into this part on the call for action from the
Yes.
declaration we had from the international workshop last year.
Mhm.
Just to round off the session today, we wanted to present the call for action. So we're just checking if you would like to start, or rather you can do that as well if you are not able to see the screen clearly.
Esther, shall I start? I just find the declaration on my computer because I have a hard time to read them. I'm using mobile. I'm
Okay.
worried about the
Yeah, go ahead,
internet.
Radhaji.
Okay,
Okay.
Radha, you can start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. The number one, redefine the narrative. We have already discussed about it from the last international workshop. We asked for call for action to redefine our mindset while we talk about the menstruation. From we need to change our narratives on menstruation from impurity to purity, from charity to human rights, hygiene to dignity, and from 5 days bleeding to life cycle approach that we have already discussed earlier. And second, protect one's fundamental rights to human dignity, not allowing anyone to deny or stigmatize this. This is the principle of the human right, and each menstruators, no matter whether they are from global north or global south, or trans men or queer or with disability, they all deserve the fundamental rights. And the third one, the linked dignity in menstruation from global efforts to colonize, own, direct, or subvert the narrative. That means the struggle, the suffering, the success, the pain, often assumed, misinterpreted, manipulate, and the structure or framework for the intervention are happening, and that must be de-linked. That means the donors, the policymakers, the actors, the stakeholders have to focus on the ground reality. The dignity must be in the center, but depending on the context, we have to respect and not only the respect, also accept the leadership of the local leaders. And also, globally, we talk about only the hygiene or health or education, while we talk about the menstruation. This hygiene product or education or infrastructure are important elements, but these are not enough. Unless and until we do not touch the human-centered life cycle approach, we cannot bring the dignified menstruation. That is why we need to cross our comfort zones. Shall I continue, Lakshman?
Yes, please. Yeah, as much as you are able to.
And as we already discussed about the role of the men and boys, the boys and men are not mensurate at all, but they are equally responsible to make menstruation dignified. No matter whether they are in the professional or formal or informal power. Wherever they stand, they equally accountable for making menstruation dignified. And number 6, many people, many feminists, many development activists, many activists from the literature, they don't like to talk about the menstruation. They point at us or blaming us. Millie, Esther, Enthu, myself, even Lakshman, I think he gets some kind of side chat because he's talking about the menstruation. So we need to challenge and we need to cross the comfort zone, because unless and until we won't bring the justful culture from home, we cannot make it happen. So with the respect for diversity and inclusion, we need to dismantle the stereotyping, the patriarchal norms, what we have been practicing till now. And if we go through the Googles or journals, it is very difficult to find the evidences, research. The researchers have been focusing on, again, hygiene infrastructure, not for the dignity perspective. What was the first feeling or experience when the boys or girls knew the word of the menstruation? This is how the developmental or the psychosocial aspect grown up within the childhood. So that kind of things we don't find. Let me give another example from Asia Pacific region. During the process of this book, Dignified Menstruation, a Practical Handbook, we don't find the specific researches or studies in Asia Pacific region on menstruation. We picked up from the blog, personal blog, from newspaper. That means there is no research. And the research is very in very silos, like in business perspective, entrepreneurship perspective, product, hygiene, infrastructure. They are not linking. There is no research with the link with the child marriage, or link with the sexual and gender-based violence, or link with the sexual and reproductive rights. So that kind of things we need to reconsider. We urge for that as well. And also the media always highlighted the incidences. How many cases of death in Kenya or in Africa or Asia? They don't talk, they don't highlight the successful stories of Esther or Intu from Sri Lanka or Uganda or Nepal or Philippines. So the media also have to change their narratives to bring the broader perspective, why the dialogue on dignified menstruation is important and urgent for making just, peaceful, and human right, pro-human right planet. So this is how we call for action to the media. And then I think Lakshman, you continue. I speak a lot.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry, Esther, you would like to join in?
Number 9.
Yeah, so Esther?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead.
Let me see. Where are we? Tell the story fun.
9.
Yeah,
number 9.
This point, the last point on the slide.
Or seek intergenerational investment to change hearts and minds, as opposed to short-term project funding as an investment in human dignity itself. Yeah. Democratize information and stories in myriad languages to build the movement, political will, and the demand for ensuring dignity in menstruation. I think I could give an example of Uganda. Like I said, we have different tribes. We have over 40 tribes. So for members, or for community members and other stakeholders to be able to understand the gist of the matter, it's very good to translate all this information that we are sharing in the local languages that people understand. In this way, people will be able to come on board to participate in raising their voices and demand for equality. And then recognize and fight menstrual discrimination and indignity as symptomatic of a widely tolerated silent pandemic of gender-based violence. This is very true, very important. We need to discrimination. We need to start with already existing structures in our different communities and countries. to be able to raise voices against gender-based violences and inequalities that are happening in our communities. Then develop where necessary and implement where already present progressive legislative and policy frameworks at national, regional, and international levels. I would say from community, because an example of Uganda is the communities where we are coming from or where we are working from. That is where we need to start from. And then we will go on moving from one level to another, involving every stakeholder in developing policies and passing policies that for gender equality. Then allocate dedicated resources to ensure implementation of and accountability to these frameworks and institutionalization of these principles in line with national and global commitments. Actually, in Uganda, we have very good policies, very, very good. But the challenge comes in when it comes to budgeting for this kind of activities in the different policy documents. Like I said, we work a lot in isolation. So when the Ministry of Finance, for example, is planning for the health sector, they will leave out some issues. They will not find them as priority. So if we come together to raise our voices on the need for example, ending stigma or discrimination and abuse of menstruators, the policymakers will understand that there is a need to incorporate a budget on raising awareness and putting into place structures that recognize women in public spaces. So it's very important for us to work together as local leaders and policymakers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Esther. So I think just to summarize, I guess, this call for action and declaration tries to sort of put out the groundingness and grounding of the politics around this work, and that this work needs to be looked at it from a multi-sectoral perspective, because what we are trying to bring out in the agenda of dignified menstruation is at the root of all forms of discrimination and injustice and inequalities that we have been observing within the broader justice issue. But I think the urgency that it has in terms of being recognized as the root cause or the problem at the root is the important one, and need to be looked into from a holistic life cycle perspective and human-centered approach rather than very traditional development work. And that development or project understanding of this work will not solve the problem. We need to come in from a movement or a systems change perspective so that we can look at the root causes of the violation of human rights for menstruators can be understood in a very political way, and our programs are informed based on that. And we have so much looked at around sort of the role of media, the role of political leaders, the role of international development sector, and the importance of challenging some of the narratives out there as women, as weak, and people who will need support, and change that narrative to say, sort of articulate and come in very politically that women are equal beings, and we need to work under the leadership of women and girls and people who menstruate, but also to challenge the gender binary language throughout this understanding, because this always keeps on reinforcing the patriarchal understanding of gender and people and individual and identities, and that needs to be challenged, and so that we can look at systematic change and transformation at the end. But also the importance is to democratize these processes. When we talk about feminist movement building, it means the leadership, the hegemony needs to be challenged within the way we organize, we operate within ourselves. And networks such as Meninges ourselves also need to recognize that and work in order to build and bring in the more inclusive approach on connecting with the agenda of human rights. And also, I'm looking at the chat, and thank you for your thoughts. And I think, the lack of actually the the education system that can provide age-appropriate information to children and young people, always, it's okay to sort of look at as appropriate, meaning we may have to share information in same gender group or different gender groups depending on the conversation we are having. But to recognize that we need to have those systems in place is extremely important. And then the role of men and boys needs to also talk about gender beyond our own cultural, religious, and social beliefs and understanding. And we become ready to change, but also raise aspirations of girls and their parents. Again, working with the community people and parents is extremely important as well. But also one point Yasmin brings it up is how can we expect men and boys to join this struggle if men and boys even don't understand what is happening with their own bodies? Like the assumption that is put onto men's body is men can't control sex, right? Or men can't whatever stereotypes are there. So I think we need to help men understand we are gendered beings and we are shaped by these stereotypes, and that leads and we need to challenge these underlying assumptions as well. And I think thank you all for your thoughts and interesting points. Feel free to be in touch with anyone else. I see colleagues have added emails in the chat as well. So feel free. And Laura, that's a very important, and that's how the whole capitalist system has been working around. And especially looking at taxing the menstrual health products, for example, comes from that, is that it is understood as luxury products rather than essential ones. And I think that's the notion we have to really challenge. And that's what COVID has really helped us to actually understand the fault lines of the existing system and assumptions we have. So I think that's a very good point, and I think it's a very important comment that we need to keep in mind so that we can really make connections with the dots. So with that, we know we are now right around the corner. Thank you all so much for joining today. I hope this was a good insight and conversation for you. I'm sure you all have so much to contribute, but we would urge you to be in touch with us if you want to connect with the Global South Coalition and be part of the struggle and creating a movement around centering dignity at the heart of whatever agenda we are working in, especially those who are working on women's rights and gender justice issues, or even LGBTIQ issues, or even looking at the climate justice issues. And everything is so interlinked, and the notions are very much interlinked. Each of these understanding in these sectors reinforce each other, and they work as continuum to continuously reinforce the patriarchal and patriarchy as such in its essence. So let's please feel free to, I added the website for the Dignified Menstruation Coalition as well. Feel free to connect with us there, and we will be happy to have further conversation with you moving forward. So with that, I just wanted to take a moment to share with you that this Ubuntu Symposium we will still continues, and again we do this on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Tuesdays will be plenary sessions on different topics. Wednesdays are when we have Meninges has 6 different regional networks, and the regional networks organize their own sessions. That's on Wednesdays, and Thursdays are the parallel sessions. We continue with this as it is happening today. For more information and programs of the symposium, this is the link, meninges.org /symposium. You need to go to the tab called Agenda, and there you will see the list of programs that will also include information and link to register if you are interested to join. So do feel free to continuously join there as much as you can. And thank you all again for joining us. Together, we believe we can transform this profound inequality that we live in today and move and take a step further to advancing our vision of equality. So again, thank you all. Thank you, Radhaji, for your leadership, and thank you, Esther, Millie, and all the rest of the colleagues who contributed in the chat box. And the Secretariat of the Global South Coalition for organizing and managing the part for being able to put this together. Thank you all very much. And
Thank you,
all
everyone.
have rest of the good day wherever you are, and stay safe and take care. Thank you so much.